All right, thanks for coming on the show here today, Andy and Josh. I'm joined by two founding members of Skydiggers. Pretty stoked to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Jay. Good to be here.
So I know you're coming to St. John on June 5th. You're going to be playing the Area 506 Container Village, a couple other shows as well. Charlottetown on the 7th and Halifax on the 6th. And that's in support of the brand new record, Dreams and Second Chances. And you've just got off a couple of shows, your first few shows after the release, right? How have they been?
They've been great. Yeah, we've played 3 shows in Southern Ontario, Peterborough, Ottawa, and Kingston. We played this weekend in Toronto, cool. At the concert hall, and then we head east next week.
Yeah, it's been fun to add some new tunes into the show. So that's been kind of fun. We've been playing six new songs, and because of the way that we recorded them, we've had to almost relearn them to go out and play them live. So that's been very enjoyable because we recorded them very quickly and very intuitively. So we've had to go back and relearn them. So that's been kind of fun to do, and then bring them out and play them before an audience.
Okay. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you about was the production on the album. Let's just jump right into it because it's pretty thick and dense, at least to my ears, and which means it benefits from listening to it on speakers, driving around your car, but then also listening to it in the headphone experience as well can kind of unlock other, details that are happening in the mix. Mm-hmm. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about how does that dense production come together?
Well, I think in this case, because it was most of the instrumentation, most of it's live. There's a few overdubs, but not a lot. And this band, we've been playing together, since before the pandemic. But since the pandemic, we've been playing a fair bit and playing really well. And everyone seems very engaged and invested in the playing. I think part of that might be a post-pandemic thing when people didn't know whether they would either performers, whether we'd be doing shows anymore, and audiences, whether they'd go and see shows. And I don't think that we really had an idea that we would record 14 songs in the 5 days we were there, but everyone was just so present, and I think the arrangements and what you're hearing is everyone just being very present and very engaged in the process. They're all great musicians. They're all finding their own space, their own parts, and creating those arrangements. It was very collaborative that way.
And then the final sound was guided by Niles Spencer, who was a key part of the project, the engineer at the bathhouse where we recorded. So it was everyone contributed, I believe, equally. Wouldn't you say, Josh?
Absolutely.
To the sound of the record and yeah.
And interestingly, we did it. It was really recorded in 4 days. And the 5th day was mostly just Niles sculpting what were more or less rough mixes. But he became very much like one of the performers and one of the contributors. And we, in the end, we became pretty attached to those mixes that he had done, which isn't uncommon. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I think that because they were so performance oriented, it was hard to deny what he was playing back to us when we went in to have a listen.
Okay.
So it's interesting, your comment about it sounding dense. It wasn't. I would say it was the opposite of an overly produced record. Mm-hmm. I think it was more of capturing a good band, just capturing it's a great document, really, this band for us.
Yeah, when I say dense, I guess, yeah, I don't mean overproduced by any means. I just mean like a lot of stuff is going, a lot of people are playing at most of the time, or a good amount of the time. And all the tones people are choosing seem to complement each other. So even though it feels thick, and there's a little bit of the room sound in there, and a little bit of echo and on the vocals in certain parts, but you can still hear the drums. So I don't know, just kind of all like sandwiches together in a satisfying way.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
And when you do it that quickly, 4 days of tracking, I mean, that pretty much throws out that typical pre-production, take notes, change things, production. Like that's out the window if you're just going in there and getting it all done in 4 days.
Yeah, pre-production was sitting in the lounge in the kitchen with an acoustic guitar, playing the songs for the band, and some of the band members taking notes, and then running through the song acoustically a couple of times, and then heading into the studio and laying down the track.
Yeah,
it was really that. It was that quick.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that speaks to the trust you have in the musicians and Niles as well, I would imagine.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've worked with Niles before, is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm kind of curious how that relationship develops with an engineer or a producer. Like, when you started working with him originally, did you feel that connection right away, or would you say like this record's kind of like peak trust with him behind the wheel, so to speak?
Well, Josh, you and I had made a record with Niles, Let's Get Friendship Right. And then you had made records with Niles with Gord Downey. Yeah.
And a couple of other records that, were produced at the Bathhouse. So we do have a relationship with Niles that dates back, probably, I think for me, over 10 years now.
Okay.
And it was one of the reasons going there was, he's very intuitive. He's very present. And I think we really trust his judgment. I mean, an example we've been using is the first song we recorded was a song called Snowblind. And I think the take that is on the record is the first take of the, we did record it a couple more times, but when we came in and we listened through, Niall said, I think the first one is the one. And, sometimes it's really helpful to have someone, that you trust, but someone that has a little bit of perspective on that stuff. And, he's recording all the time, and he's used to being in the weeds of all that. And so he was a great collaborator and contributor on that front.
Yeah, and he's very fast, which also makes a big difference when you're, when you're batting ideas around in the studio. It doesn't become this drawn out situation in order to check out the ideas. He's very fast. He's decisive, which is
helpful, very helpful,
really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always, I find it interesting that it's like easy to talk about when a band or an artist is working with someone who helps them find the good parts. But I almost find it more interesting when a band has someone who will tell them what isn't working, or will tell them what they think isn't good. Is Niles sit in that zone a little bit?
I mean, I don't know whether he was, he would kind of steer you towards stuff that he felt was, working better, that he's not so much I think if he were producing, he'd be maybe more assertive, but he was engineering. I mean, in a lot of ways, he was also producing because of his, because of what we were asking of him. But I think, we've been doing this a long time. I think we also know when something's working or not working. And we knew that right after the first song we recorded that, the momentum was going in a good direction. And so you don't want to interrupt that at all. You want to keep on that sort of train, as it were. And so Niles, he would always offer an opinion, especially if you ask him, but he's also very aware and conscious of not interrupting that momentum. He knows how important that is.
Yeah, it's important sometimes for us. One thing we've learned over 35 years of recording is that sometimes you just have to get out of your own way. That you can't be too precious, and that when you have, we right from track one we had momentum going, and we realized that this was going to work if we let it. And so I think that was an important epiphany that we had right off the bat.
Okay. Yeah, cool. It's kind of like what you mentioned about Snowblind, the first take being the keeper, because some artists might get lost working on a song for like a whole week, one song, and then they come back to their original idea and go, oh, shoot, I had it from the beginning, but it took me a week to decide that.
We've been there.
That's cool.
Wait. Yeah. We had a song on our second record that we must have done somewhere between 25 and 40 takes of it over a period of time, and we ended up using a demo.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
and that's just kind of lesson learned at that point. But everybody goes through that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it's almost like a shift from trusting your ears to, like, quote unquote, what sounds good, to trusting your body or your instincts and what feels good. That's kind of how I describe it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys? So it was live off the floor mostly, eh? So like, was there a click track going on as well, or do you guys just feel out the tempos? Like,
there was a click, but often Noel Webb would create a loop as well. So he would create a loop with a feel and probably he'd play with a click as well, and not with everything, but I think in a lot of cases. And the click is sometimes used in the mixes as well, or not the click, but the loop that he would have going. Yeah. So yeah, and not everyone likes the click, but again, after years of recording, you get used to it. That's something that if it's there, if it's doing its job, all it's doing is keeping time for you. It's not freaking out. I mean, I remember early on playing to a click track and just being totally intimidated by it, and just sort of focused on it and not, but at some point you just learn to let it do its job, and you do your job.
I would say also in the early days of the band, we used to speed up and slow down together. So when we went into record, it was odd. The click track kind of interrupted that band feel, because it would work. And between our first and second records, we were playing a lot live for about 2 years.
Okay. And
so a lot of those songs on the second record, on Restless, we had been playing for a long time. And that was, I think, part of the issue with playing with a click track as well, is that some of those songs just sped up or slowed down in certain spots naturally.
And of course, so when you're in the studio now and the pressure's on, something feels off and you might not be able to put your finger on it. Is that part of the issue there?
Yeah, well, I also don't think that, these days we don't play songs for a year or two before recording them.
Okay, yep.
And particularly with this record, the only song we had played live was Snowblind, and we had only played it 2 or 3 times, if that. Yeah. So it's, that was also, it was as I say, a voyage of discovery for everyone every day as we would come up with the next song and play it for people. And then it would become whatever the band decided or the band felt from hearing the demo.
Okay.
The demo being the acoustic version in the kitchen.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's I like younger folks might find that kind of like intimidating, you know, but when I guess you guys have been at it for so long, I'm sure it's still intimidating on some level, right? But it's at the same time, you're just kind of letting go and seeing what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like always, there's a vulnerability to bringing a song in to a recording situation. Is it going to endure is it good enough? Is it all those things, they're just, at this point, I think for us, it's like, they're just songs. Some of them, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's not their time to be recorded, sometimes it's, there's any number of things that dictate why something works or doesn't work. But again, I think all these, the bathhouse being, a place that everyone in the band has spent some time as well. It really is a very special place. I would sort of say this all the time, but it was built by musicians for musicians, and it's a residential studio. You can kind of create your own pace and your own rhythm there, and it's just a terrific creative space, and so it really lends to an environment that lets people focus on what they want to contribute to that creative process.
Do you get to live right on site, basically? Like, are you kind of like you're on site, sleeping there, and everything?
It's an old inn from I think dates back to the 1850s. It's an old Empire Loyalist home inn that was built, years ago on the highway that would have taken carriages up and down through Upper Canada, and the upstairs are bedrooms, and the downstairs is the recording area. Then there's a kitchen. The kitchen is where we would sit around and play the tunes for everyone, and they would maybe just chart out what the chords are, and then we'd head to our little stations and put our headphones on and start the day.
Okay.
Or start the song.
How do you maintain a schedule in a situation like that?
I think the longer you're there, the more challenging it is to maintain a schedule.
Okay. The more comfortable you get.
Well, yeah, and maybe sometimes the later you stay up some nights, and then you're starting later, and I think that can spiral. I think Josh and I have been there enough that I think for us we have kind of a schedule that works, and an amount of days that are effective for us to be there before you get into the the law of diminishing returns, which can happen in a recording studio very easily. So we find, if we're there 4, 5, 6 days, that we can get a lot done. And, we would usually start when Niles is ready to start, which would usually be sometime around 11 a.m. And then we'd work through until, 8 or 9 at night with lunch and dinner breaks, and it's all pretty civilized at this point. The era of 12 to 14-hour days in the studio that we went through at the beginning, because we're super excited to be in the studio, and that's kind of the way that studios would work. 35 years ago, it was the coffee and cigarette diet for the engineers. Who all had the gray studio tan.
The gray studio tan. The assistant, the intern staying up all night cutting tapes together.
All of that stuff. No, we find 7 or 8 hours is plenty now for concentration, for stamina, and you just beyond that you become far less effective. Okay. And I think we're just faster in our decision making, and we know our abilities and our limitations. So when we're overdubbing something, like redoing a part, it's like we know, that's the way it's going to be. it's not going to be perfect. So I think we're a little more accepting of what it is that creates our sound.
Okay. I mean, you've probably seen the shift. Whoever wants to answer this, Josh or Andy, the shift from the tape days to the Pro Tools days, where now perfection is kind of like a couple mouse clicks away. Any thoughts or opinions on that in general?
Well, I mean, it went from tape to digital, like to ADATs or DA88s,
okay,
which was digital tape, and then to ultimately to the platforms like Pro Tools or Logic or whatever. So we've seen a real transition from tape, and I think our reference points with tape are still, there's certain sounds, analog sounds, that we have an affinity for, I think. And initially with the digital phenomenon, the way it was described that I always really identified with was initially with digital stuff that there was more zeros than ones. So but now, I mean, it's really, I don't know that you can make the argument that there's a lot of gaps in the digital sound, but it is like a different medium. It's like, to me, it's also the difference between a watercolor and an oil painting. They're different. They're different things, but there's no denying that the speed of the Pro Tools and as a tool, like for example, we would record a great take on analog, on a 2-inch 24 track, and there would be one kick drum or one guitar and chord that was wrong, or it made the take kind of unusable ultimately. And now you can fix that, and it's just a tool. It's, from that perspective, it's amazing. But of course, like everything, when weaponized in a bad way, it's it can just be a distraction too, and it can be trying to correct things that you really need to be able to do properly in the first place. So that's I don't know if that answers your question, but Andy, I mean, I know, for example, Andy's always preferred the sound of his voice on analog tape, and I don't know that he could technically express what it is. It's really just an intuitive, like an aesthetic feeling. But
that's all. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but all of these, plugins and that have been developed in the digital world are, a lot of them are meant to duplicate. What is the right word? Not imitate, duplicate, but to bring the analog world into the digital world, so that the differences now, as Josh said, are minimal compared to what they were when digital recording first started. We made our first recording on a digital system.
Oh, cool.
And that was 36 years ago. And it sounds different.
Weird.
It sounds a little weird to our ears. This most recent recording, I think, would have been a really good one to do on tape. I think with the way the band was playing and playing all together, I think that would have been great. But I think it's almost a moot point these days. There don't seem to be nearly as many people available to maintain these machines, the 2-inch machines or whatever format of tape it is. And it's just, as Josh said, you can use the digital formats as a tool, and it speeds the process along tremendously.
Yeah, and the production on this record, I mean, you could probably fool some folks and tell them like, oh yeah, this is the tape. Like it feels and sounds, kind of sits in that space.
Yeah, well, it also got to the point we were doing recordings where we would maybe we would do some of the bed tracks on analog tape, and then transfer that to digital.
Okay.
And do so. I mean, now you can't avoid, at some point in the process, you're going to be dealing with the digital world, no matter how you record. So, that's just a fact of, if you're going to put up on streaming services or you're going to make CDs or whatever you're going to do, at some point in time, your recording is going to go into the digital world. It's just unavoidable.
Yeah. It's going to become ones and zeros at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about a couple songs specifically, because one that jumped out to me upon the first listen, and maybe because to me it kind of has this East Coast energy to it, but the song Mother's Pocket, I really like the way kind of like the bass line is kind of like draw. It's kind of got this weird little feel to it too, but then kind of the vocals come in and mimic the bass line. And at first I thought the bass guitar, the mixing of it, the bass guitar is in the left channel, which I thought was interesting. But then later on at the end of the song, it sounds like a double bass or maybe a stand-up bass is coming into the mix. So then I started to wonder, I don't know what I'm hearing, but it's just such an interesting song.
That's a song of Jessie, Jessie Bell Smith, that she brought in to the session. And it's a completely live take, including the vocals. And I think what you're hearing, I don't think there's really much bass guitar in that song until the last maybe quarter of the song. I think what you're hearing is a pump organ.
Okay.
I think, and maybe the electric guitar, Josh.
And I think Derek the bass player, might be chording some stuff.
He might be, yeah.
But so it's more like a guitar sound, and then he just drops in with that. I don't know, their quarter notes or something. It's a really nice lift. The tune,
yeah.
But just to speak, like Jessie, that tune, and she has a great feel for very traditional music, and he's often described her as sort of she's of another time, like she's sort of she lives now, of course, but she could be living 100 years ago, or maybe 100 years from now. She has that sort of energy, and I think that song's kind of a great example of that. That her aesthetic.
Absolutely. Okay, that explains it, because I was like, this sounds like Celtic traditional, not full on, but it had touches of like the Celtic vibe out here in the East Coast, and just the way, and even her vocals, like the way they're performed. So that's really interesting. And then what's cool about that too is the next song is Snowblind, which all of a sudden kind of like lifts things up into a different feel or energy. And so I'm kind of like wondering, when you're pacing the record, how much thought goes into like the track order, like how much the gaps between the songs, like is that something you guys decide together? How does that all play in? Because that's such an important part of an album, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think sequencing is really important. I think in the streaming world, it's become a lot less important, because that's not really, people don't really or a lot of people don't sit and listen to albums front to back anymore. It's become part of their daily experience. They're often doing something else while they're listening to music. But I still think it's important, and I think for this album, it was important to showcase the three different lead vocals in the first three songs.
Okay. Yep.
Which was the way I was thinking about sequencing the first three songs would be, myself, then Josh, and then Jessie, and then Snowblind, the fourth song, has all three of us singing all the way through.
Okay.
So it was really an introduction. I thought the first four songs was an introduction into what to expect from the rest of the album as far as everyone's contribution vocally.
Okay, so kind of like that, the first 4 tracks is like sets up the record for what's to come, really. Okay, that's cool.
Yes.
I like that quite a bit.
Yeah.
In that same song, Mother's Pocket, is there like the acoustic guitar, like kind of sounds like jangly? Like, is it like a Nashville tune guitar, or is it just like an older guitar, or something strange happening there? Or that's my ears.
No, it's not Nashville tuning. It's just a regular. It's a Martin D28 that Jesse's playing.
Okay.
But also Aaron's playing guitar, so I don't know what you're hearing is jangly, and I'd have to listen and do.
Maybe it's the way it's working together, but it's not like jangly is like a compliment to me. Like it just sounds.
Yeah. No. I know you didn't mean it in a negative way. But I can't. I would have to hear it to.
She's also Jesse's playing the acoustic and singing at the same time, so maybe the sound of the acoustic might be part of the bleed into the vocal mic.
Okay, Talk about something that's probably been lost. The bleed, mic bleed.
Yeah,
to glue it all together. That's really cool.
Well, I'm sure there's an AI program that can eliminate the.
Yeah, there is. I've got one. I've got one in my Pro Tools rigs.
I know. I think we might have used that as well.
Sometimes you need it, Sometimes you need it. It's a tool. Coming back to that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, maybe I'm thinking too much about this, but I noticed like you got a song, Chase the Sun, Light on the Water, Walk with the Stars, and even the song Snowblind. Kind of got this like sky and I mean your band name is Skydiggers, but kind of got this like ethereal sky vibe going on. Is that just a coincidence, or is that was that part of the direction for the record?
I don't think it was conscious at all. But I mean, they're themes, they're kind of universal, timeless themes as well that I think we do gravitate towards. We always have, if we had any agenda as far as songwriting and recordings, we were, I think, always trying to write songs and recordings that sounded relevant when they were released and relevant 30 years later or even 30 years before.
Okay.
Those were by the time we became a band and we'd all had different recording experiences and experiences in general, I think those were kind of benchmarks that we, they weren't like hard and fast rules, but they were, I think we just aspired to create that kind of music, which I think has been good for a band the band that's lasted for as long as we have and made as many recordings as we have. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that every song has to be that way on a record, but certainly that I think is a consistent theme lyrically and musically throughout our recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh, Walk with the Stars is a tip of the hat to Gord down.
Yes, no, it is.
Cool.
And it that song was written with Jim Bryson, who's a songwriter from the Ottawa area, Ottawa Valley, Stittsville he lives in. And Jim had done some playing with the Hip on for their release, We Are the Same, which was put out, I think, in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And the chorus of that song was it's an old Jamaican proverb, and the older the moon, the brighter it shines was the proverb, and I like that image. But I didn't have a second half of the line of the chorus until we talked about doing this recording. I played the song to Andy, and then whether it was after I played it to him or right around that time, because Jim had worked with Gord and so had I, and we were all good friends with him. His spirit name in the indigenous world was man. He was given the name Man Who Walks Among the Stars, and I thought that was a cool point of reference for that song because of our connection with Jim as well. So, and Gord.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the kind of story behind that song.
Okay, that's a really nice tribute. Yeah, that's a great tune. So that's a really nice tribute.
Cheers. Yeah.
Maybe too. I noticed like two of the most driving songs. They also like maybe I kind of like to see patterns in things, but like one maybe two maybe, and then I love you too maybe. Those are like two of the most driving songs, and they both have the word maybe in it, and they both end with like the 3 dots.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds, so that adds to the way the album flows. Kind of like up and down a little bit. Is again any plotting behind that coincidence, or is it just a coincidence?
No. I mean, I do use, I overuse the 3 dots, which the etc.
I love
symbol.
I love it.
For some reason, it's become fascinating to me to let thoughts trail off, because maybe that's the way I speak. Not always in full sentences before I go into the next thought.
Okay.
No, they're both collaborations between myself and Michael Johnston, keyboardist, and we just went. I guess we booked the studio about 6 weeks before we knew we were going in, and that gave us, I guess, a deadline to come up with some material to take into the studio, and Michael and I started exchanging voice memos with ideas, and the first one that I sent him was the verse of 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, which I had come up with when watching Joseph Biden's inauguration on January 20th, 2021.
Okay,
and there was a wonderful poet named Amanda Gorman who recited a poem called "The Hill We Climb." And I just found it very inspiring. The music or the words don't have anything to do with the poem other than just being inspired to create by someone who she is fantastic, and such hope then versus now. 4 years later, the worm has turned. So I sent that to Michael. I had that idea floating around for several years. He came up with a chorus melody, and then he sent me a musical idea for "I Love You Too," maybe, and then I came up with melody and words for that.
Okay.
So it's just they're not. I guess I go in cycles sometimes where there are certain words that I become attached to, and maybe was one of them.
Okay. when you get those,
it's not good enough.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's from the first record. Yeah.
So it's been there the whole. That's the through line of the whole career. Maybe.
Another word that I've used a lot over the years is again.
Again. Okay.
Again. I somehow I like there are certain words I just like the sound of, I guess.
Do you have a song called "Maybe Again"?
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's a good album title.
Yeah, that might be the next one, eh? When you have those moments of inspiration, I'm kind of like, so now you can do a quick voice memo on your cell phone, but just in general, like, is it sometimes a race to capture that seed that might pop into your head, be it a vocal melody or a guitar lick or something?
Document it, and you can never necessarily get it the same, but yeah, it's just a good little document to have. I do that. I think we both do that all the time.
Yeah, either writing things down or voice memo. I find over the years I need to. I don't have that kind of writer's memory that some people can recite. Something that they've heard months later and do it. And I find I tend to get words out of sequence. I tend to paraphrase if I've heard something that I like. So that's why I want to get it down right away so that I keep the words in the proper sequence.
Okay.
And then voice memos are great for if you're sitting playing the guitar. I had a little dictaphone before before there were smartphones. And I also used to call the answering machine on the home phone.
Yeah, good trick.
And use that. So it has been about recording ideas.
Okay. Yeah, the answering machine. That's great. I don't know why I'd never considered that, but that's a fantastic way to do it. Way back when that's a really. I'm sure lots of people were doing that, calling themselves and leaving them the memory of the song or the idea on tape.
I would always start with, "Hi, it's me."
That's awesome. Well, maybe we can take just a step back. I've heard you mention in interviews before, like the Jam, who I'm actually pretty new to the band, the Jam. I just started listening to the album, The Gift. I just grabbed it on vinyl randomly for like $2. And then I happened to hear you guys mention them in an interview. And then I've heard you mention DOA, who are still going strong. So I'm kind of wondering about the punk rock DIY aesthetic and how that's kind of like, has that been part of is that kind of where you come from? And is it still kind of a part of your, organization, like your ethos or whatever?
Well, I think when punk rock came into the consciousness, public consciousness in Toronto, kind of late 70s. I think both Josh and I, playing in different bands, I think we were inspired by the energy of it, and the passion of it, and the fact that you did not have to be, a guitar wizard or in order to express that energy and passion. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably that's certainly something I took from it. And I love the Jam, I love the Clash, and then as we went on and Josh and I started playing together about 40 years ago, we also realized that there was that kind of energy and passion in some traditional music as well. And so we sort of, I think, took inspiration from both punk rock and from traditional folk music and country music, I think. But Josh had more direct experience with the Clash, really, and with English music.
You spent some time in England, right, Josh?
I did, yeah. Okay. I had a high school band that moved over to England.
The whole band moved?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Like 1982. So it was just kind of towards the end of the Clash, their time together.
Okay.
I think it sort of ended around 84-ish. And long story, but we got connected to the Clash's manager, Bernie Rhodes, and were kind of given the keys to his studio, and met all the guys in the Clash. But it was just, as things were sort of imploding for them. I think the biggest thing about that era of music was just the accessibility, which was what Andy was referencing. Like, you didn't have to be a virtuoso on an instrument. Mm-hmm. You could just, it was more about attitude. It was more about expression. And a lot of traditional music is like that too. Like there's that tradition of, learning stuff just almost through osmosis. You're around it. And I was around a lot of music as a young person. I had two older brothers and two parents that listened to a lot of music, very diverse music. So I had access to a lot of folk music, and but also, my one of my brothers had all those punk rock records. So it was all there. And yeah, it was that ability. I think for Andy and I initially, it was like, having played in bands, you couldn't play in a room, in a living room for people with your band, so it was, but when we started playing, whatever, a Hank Williams song, Doc Watson song, a traditional song, it was just a guitar and two voices, and we could take it anywhere. And that was like a gateway into kind of a new world for us. And it continues to this day, you know, like it's such a great thing to be able to do it, just the two of us in any situation, because it's that immediate and it's that, it's like traditional music, you know, like that's such an amazing, the East Coast has such an awesome tradition of that. And it's always, it will, I don't think it'll ever go away, you know, like it's in the you know, it's in the water, sir.
Yeah, it's in the water.
Yeah. You know, like it's just, you just grow up with it and it's there, and you kind of take it for granted too, you know, like, but that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
I think.
That's interesting, because I wanted to ask you about publishing and SOCAN and stuff, just because it's really rare that I have a chance to talk to folks who've been in the industry for so long. And publishing and SOCAN is so mysterious, even to new bands like right now. And then so I happen to notice on the catalog, like I think you guys are credited as writing like a Bear McNeil's tune. I don't know if they covered one of your tunes. Speaking of like East Coast songs, if they covered one of your songs, or if you guys co-wrote a song with them, is that?
Not to my, I don't think either of us co-wrote a song with Bear McNeil's.
Maybe they covered a Skydiggers song. I didn't.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, because that came up when I put in the name. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you know the title of the song?
I feel like either the word West or the word God was in the title, but I'm not sure.
No, maybe.
No, I can't remember. I should have had it up on the screen here, but yeah.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell. Well, it's if you search the SOCAN database, it's there.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on that in general? Like the public, because you hear horror stories of people sign. Maybe it's not so much the same anyway today because of streaming, but you know, people would sign away their publishing, not really understanding what was going on. But do you have any like thoughts or opinions on how that's played out over the years?
I've spent the last 45 years trying to figure out publishing.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's one of the great mysteries of the music business for some of us anyway. For me, Josh has been more involved in that. I think on that side of things, I think he has a much better understanding of it than I do.
I'm not sure I'm in the advice giving business though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, I would, you know, I would say that, you know, what really has changed is streaming has really changed the whole ecosystem of how songwriters and publishers and people that own master records, how they get compensated. And I think that still needs to be addressed, because I still think, the streaming services are making more money than they are giving to the creators. You know, I think that there's still an imbalance to that. And I think that's wrong, you know, we're at a point in our lives where I think ultimately we've been pretty fortunate, and we've held on to our publishing, and we own most of our own masters. Cool. And in some cases that's worked out well for us, and could continue in the future. Ideally, that's, I don't know that it was so much out of design, but as Andy said early on, we were offered publishing deals, and I just don't think we quite understood what we couldn't really put a value on what it wasn't just the money. It was just like what it seems so nebulous, the actual what they were saying they could do for you. Now I do, just because I've spent a lot of time around publishers and around people that have publishing deals. I do think they're, from an organization standpoint, from a like a secretarial kind of standpoint, publishers can be very helpful. And but it's just it's changed so much over the last 35 years, and in the last since streaming has happened, it's changed that much more. Mm-hmm. Inevitably, it's who knows where it's going to evolve. But just to come back to the point I was wanting to make earlier, what's not good about it is that a new generation of creative people and songwriters are not going to have the benefit of earning income that used to exist. Mm-hmm. And doesn't anymore. Mm-hmm. You know? And I think there's something wrong about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. If you look at the payouts from a streaming service versus that's why it's a big deal when CBC Music picks up on a new artist or will start to play a couple of their tunes, in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening shows, because you get pretty legitimate SOCAN payouts from that's getting spun multiple times as across the country,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've been the benefactors, I don't know what the word. Beneficiaries. Thank you. Of that, from CBC and, so, I don't know. It would be tough for us to complain overall. I think we've been pretty fortunate, but I think there's a real, discrepancy, and I think there's a real problem on that front, because people no one's making money from selling their music anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's just there's a real there's something that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a tough question, but hopefully they'll come to a fair, somehow find a fair arrangement for the tech companies and the artists to be compensated. Mm-hmm. It makes me think of, so when I was looking up in YouTube, someone uploaded the old Spotlight episode of Skydiggers from Much Music. And it really made me want to ask you if you guys ever did the Speaker's Corner thing. You ever go into Speaker's Corner and perform
no.
in there? No. Okay.
We did not.
Just thought that'd be funny to ask. I think that's how the Bare Naked Ladies supposedly got their big break.
It was.
Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That was, they were so good at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They really were. They're very clever.
Yeah. Very clever.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right. Well, I don't know. What is there anything else you want to touch on? I know your Substack would be a good place to send people, right? Substack, and of course, check out the new record on streaming services. Of course, you also have a Bandcamp. Bandcamp's a great way to support artists.
Absolutely.
Especially to time it up on a Bandcamp Friday. That's where all the money goes to the artists.
That's right. Very cool. It's just been great, Jay. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I'd recommend everyone go check out the new record, Dreams and Second Chances. Catch you guys here too. That's next week, June 5th, coming up. We're on June already, so June 5th, John.
Yeah.